Hi guys, and welcome to this tutorial on using SimBrief for creating your flight plans for Microsoft Flight Simulator. If you haven't come across SimBrief before, SimBrief is a free online web page which allows you to create very detailed, very realistic flight plans for for just about any aircraft and any flight simulator going, but I'm obviously concentrating on Microsoft Flight Simulator at the moment. Now, first thing you'll need to do is, if you get to simbrief.com, is register for an account. It's all free, which makes it even more amazing when you consider the amount of information you're going to get back from it. Once you've created your account, click New Flight, which is found in the dispatch system just here, and we can start making your flight plan up. Now, as I said, it has got almost every aircraft you can think of flying all ready to go and waiting for you. So I fly real world flight plans, which real world flight routes in the Airbus 320. They can obviously be found just by using Flight Radar 24 or any other flight tracking app. Pick a flight that you want to do, and then we can replicate it here and get the flight plan for it. So if you select the aircraft, let's say the Airbus 320 just here, SimBrief has a default set of values for the A320. That is how much fuel it can take, how far it can fly, how much cargo, passengers, etc. that it can take, and everything is all done for you. But every aircraft is slightly different. For instance, EasyJet's Airbus 320s will be slightly different to British Airways A320s, and that's because they ask for a different amount of seats, or the way the cabin's laid out, which affects the amount of passengers that they can take, and also the amount of cargo and amount of fuel that they can take as well. So what you really need is an airframe, an aircraft which matches up exactly with the default A320 Neo found in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, I have done this for you. If we look at this one here, there's my EasyJet A320 Neo. It doesn't really matter what airline. See there's one above it, British Airways A320 Neo. It makes no difference to the airline that I've popped in, but what does make a difference, if we go and have a look at the details of it, are all these pieces of information just here. So the empty weight of the aircraft, the maximum zero fuel weight, the maximum takeoff weight, maximum landing weight, etc. All these values have been taken from the default A320 Neo in the Microsoft Flight Simulator, so that they all match up and work perfectly. And what I have done is I have shared this aircraft setting in the comment section of this video, so you, once you've got your SimBrief account set up, you can click on the link and add this to your aircraft fleet, which means you will then be able to come down here and select it there. So now we've got our aircraft all set up, and the other default settings for this is there's the registration of a real A320 Neo in use by EasyJet, and EasyJet always seem to use a cost index of 8, and I'll go through some of these in a little bit more detail in a moment, but you'll see that there are a lot of defaults already set for you, which saves you a lot of time when planning your flight. Now we've got the aircraft selected, have a look at this little section here. So OFP layout, that's the operational flight plan layout. That's basically how you're going to display your flight plan once it's all been made up. And as I say, I like to always fly as EasyJet, but there are lots of other versions available. So there you've got Ryanair, Qantas, KLM, EasyJet, Etihad, Lufthansa, Aer Lingus. So if you prefer to fly one of the other airlines, you can select one of these here, or just go for the default Lido chart. But I'm going to leave mine as EasyJet because the default, the setting you get from an EasyJet flight plan within SimBrief looks identical to the real world flight plans that the real EasyJet captains get before departing, which I think is fantastic. A couple of other things then quickly. leave that into kilograms as I'm flying in Europe. Contingency fuel is automatically set to 6 minutes. Reserve fuel, I set that to 60 minutes just because still getting to grips with the new flight simulator, you want to have a good fuel reserve to make sure that that nothing goes astray, plus which the fuel burn on the default A320 isn't quite accurate just yet. Detailed navlog, we need that checked because that gives you all the information you need for your flight plan. ETOPS planning, that's only in use if you're doing transatlantic, which isn't very often in A320s, but you can leave that ticked. Plan step climbs rather, if we need those. So if you've got a very heavy aircraft, you can't climb all the way up to your intended cruising altitude, say it's 39,000 feet, you need to fly a little bit before and burn off some fuel so the aircraft becomes lighter before you get up to your desired cruising altitude. So leave that ticked. Runway analysis, that just gives you a little bit of information on the runways you'll be using, leave that ticked. NOTAMs, notice to airmen, leave that ticked because that gives you information on the runway, on the airports that you'll be flying in and out of. The FIR NOTAMs, that's basically detailed NOTAMs about the airspaces that you'll be flying over. In real life, obviously, real pilots, they do get all those details, but for simulation, I leave that unticked. Otherwise, you get pages and pages and pages of information that really is not required for flight simulation. So let's have a look then at popping in some information for the flight. So I'm going to be doing a real world flight today. It's an EasyJet flight 6960. So we're just going to pop that in here. There we go. And this flight goes from Nice in France up to Edinburgh in Scotland. So I'm just going to enter those two airport codes. Okay, and you'll see that the website, once you enter the two airport codes, started to fill in a little bit more information based on where it is you're going to fly. The alternate is predetermined. You can change that if you want, but Manchester, that seems like a decent alternate. EasyJet do have a base at Manchester, so we can leave that there. And if we come down here, the registration of the aircraft is already filled in from this here. Cost index is 8. Now the cost index, if you're not familiar with that, basically just determines how fuel efficient the aircraft is going to fly. The higher you set this number, the more fuel efficient the aircraft is not going to be. So EasyJet is a low cost carrier, so they use a cost index usually of 8 for their flights, so we can leave that as 8. You can also, if you prefer, just leave that at auto and this will work it out for you, but I leave that at 8 for when I'm doing this. The call sign for this particular flight is Easy 85 Yankee November, so we'll just enter that in. Notice the call sign differs from the flight number. That happens quite a lot actually. So again, you can get that from Flight Radar 24. If you click on any of the flights, you'll see the call sign and the flight number aren't always the same. So if we come down here then, let's have a little look at the optional entries. The control, as it says, fields can be automatically will be automatically calculated, but you can change them if you wish. So there's your selected time en route, no need to change that. Departure runway, again, this uses live weather, so these will be the actual runways in use at the time that you're putting the information in, so no real reason to change either of these. The taxi and taxi out, extra fuel, we don't need any extra fuel as we've already said, we've got some reserve fuel up there. Altitude, if you want to fly at a specific altitude, go in and pop that in, otherwise I tend to leave that at automatic. Passengers, automatic, and it will feel that for you, and cargo, for some reason it's set to 0, but if we want we can add some cargo by just changing that to automatic, and the 0 fuel weight, leave that at automatic as well. Come down a little bit further and it has already given you a route for your flight. just here. There's some suggested routes and you can change them just by clicking into those. Now the AirAC cycle, I've got a Navigraph subscription, which means I use the latest AirAC cycle. It changes every month, so if you've got a Navigraph subscription you can go in and change it there. However, if you haven't, don't worry about that, just leave that as it is. So let's have a look here at the route that it's given us. Wow, that's an interesting route, isn't it? Goes all the way over to Amsterdam before heading up out over the North Sea and up to Edinburgh. So if we change that to a different route, there we go, that's a little bit more direct, so I'm going to stick with that one for now. You can view more routes by clicking here, and you can see that this is based on compliant routes because SimBrief now works with various other partners that use real world flight planners, so they make sure that they are valid for the different AirAC cycles and various other components. So we could stick with that route there, and that's all done. Once we're happy with that, all that's left to do is to generate the operational flight plan. So we'll click that and just wait a few seconds. This doesn't take very long at all. And here we are. So your operational flight plan is this thing just here. And as I said previously, this looks identical to an EasyJet flight plan that real EasyJet pilots get before stepping into the cockpit. So if we just go up here, that's the summary of everything. How much fuel you're going to take, the aircraft's zero fuel weight. If you're unsure what that means, the zero fuel weight is the weight of the aircraft when the pilots are on board, the passengers are on board, the luggage is on board, the overall weight of the aircraft. The only thing missing is the fuel. So that's the weight of the aircraft ready to go but without any fuel on it. And there is the aircraft's takeoff weight. Just here is the route that the aircraft will be following. Okay, and you've got all the information listed here. So that's the dry weight of the aircraft, so that's the aircraft with nothing on it. That's the payload, passengers plus luggage. Zero fuel weight, all these are in kilograms as well, remember. That's the amount of fuel we require. That's going to be the takeoff weight of the aircraft. That's how much fuel we're going to burn during our trip. That's the landing weight, and if you can see here, they've got also some maximums, which is what has been predetermined from Microsoft Flight Simulator that I popped into that aircraft setup that we made, and I've shared with you in the comments. So there's our flight route, total distance of 898 miles. How much fuel? These are all default values, so amount of fuel you're going to use at taxi, for the trip, contingency, fuel to get to your alternate airport, your final reserve, and any additional fuel that you added when filling in the details. And then here you've got a full list of the waypoints that you're going to be following. Not only that, you've got your distance to go, that is DTG, distance to go, so you can see that's getting lower and lower. Your airspeed, which will then turn to a Mach number, so that's airspeed in knots. Then when you get above a certain height, it turns into the Mach number. The air temperature, wind, and your fuel on board. So the maximum fuel remaining at this point. So obviously this should be decreasing as we get closer to Edinburgh. We've then got a few more bits of information. So you've got information about the runways, so your takeoff runway, there's your tailwind component, your crosswind component, and there the winds aloft, so winds in the air, let's check those out. Detailed flight plan for the air traffic control, and then you've got your weather for for the airports that you're going to be flying to and from. So for instance, at the moment, departure airport, you've got variable wind, good visibility, scattered clouds 6,600 feet, broken clouds at 10,000 feet, temperature is 27, dew point 17, and the QNH, which is quite important, 1023, no significant changes over the next few hours. And then the destination airport, this looks like a fun approach. So currently the wind is 216 degrees at 15 knots, but gusting up to 26 knots. It's also variable between 240 and 300. Visibility 10,000, so that's good. Broken 2,300 and temperature 15, QNH 1018. Of course, that is the weather at Edinburgh now. By the time you get there in 2.5–3 hours time, that could have changed, so you will need to check that whilst en route. If we scroll down a little bit further, these are all the NOTAMs. I'll give you something to read. It's up to you how much. It's only a simulator, isn't it? But it's up to you how much you want to read these. Some of these, however, if you're flying on VATSIM, are quite important. For instance, there are taxiways that can be closed and things like that. So always worth having a look at, particularly anything that's in bold. So scroll down to the bottom. There's your route. There's any significant weather, the different flight levels, and there's your winds. So all in all, that is exactly what a real life EasyJet pilot gets. And thanks to SimBrief, that is now what you have got as well. What we're going to have a look at doing now is showing you how to import that into Flight Simulator. So you can obviously print and download this as a PDF so that you've got it. You can pre-file this flight if you're flying on VATSIM. This makes it very easy. I only know about VATSIM because that's the only one I use, but if we click that, it just takes you to the bottom of the page. You can pre-file on VATSIM and it takes you to the flight planning page on VATSIM. Everything's already filled in. You literally just click File the Flight Plan. Let's go back up the top. This is the bit we need then next. Download the FMS. If we click on that, then this tells you, or rather it gives you, the different versions of the flight plan that you can download. So if we're flying in FS2020, this is the version that we want. So I'm just going to download this. I'm just checking it and downloaded it into my downloads folder, which it has done. Okay, don't open the file because the computer can't open it, but Microsoft Flight Simulator can. So if we now go in here, you'll have to excuse the music. I haven't discovered a way yet to turn that off. But if we go then onto the world map, and at the bottom you've got load and save. Let's click load. And we'll load the flight plan that we've just saved. There it is. And there we go. There is our flight plan all loaded up for us. And with all the different waypoints. Now it will also, as you can see, have put in the departure runway and the SID and stars for the flight plan that were included as well. If we go back to the flight plan, there's our departure SID, standard instrument departure, and that's our star, the arrival, which is all there for you. The only thing it's not done there, if you look at the approach, it has not selected the runway. So the flight plan said we would be using ILS runway 24, so we can just click that. And there we are. All that's left to do is click fly, and then your flight plan will be loaded into your navigation computer and you won't have to input all the points yourself. Hope you found that useful. Any questions, leave them in the comments section. I'll do my best to answer them. I'll see you soon.